My name is Dion Davis. I've tried to live my life with no regrets, but I guess my final regret is not getting vaccinated. Please, don't let not getting vaxxed be your final regret.
Share it, please, with everyone you know who is a Black man, who loves a Black man, who cares about the well-being of our community. You definitely do not want to miss this episode. So hang in there. We're first going to bring on Mr. Wayne Bruce, my wonderful co-producer, to go through our weekly recap, as we always do.
Hey.
Hey, how's it going?
Hey. I just want to say like Dwayne. What was that character from Raj?
Oh,
Somebody will tell us in the comments what the character was, right?
From What's Happening.
From What's Happening. Hey.
Dwayne. It was Dwayne.
It was Dwayne. Hey. Can y'all hear me?
But you're Wayne. So.
I know. I just want to say, Dr. Clarke, you're going to have to go through that incredible opening part of it again. So we'll do that later because they couldn't hear us. It was totally my fault.
Okay.
Yeah. Couldn't hear us. Really couldn't hear you. But it was totally my fault. You know? So if y'all want to blame somebody, blame me. It was my fault.
Well, the main thing I want to make sure everybody does is to share this episode because it's going to be fantastic. We're going to be talking about, as you see, the weekly recap. We're going to hit the debunk, but then we're going to go straight into talking about Black men and COVID-19 and the disproportionate number of deaths that we had in the Black community, but specifically among Black men. So please share this episode with everybody you know. And if you haven't hit like on Facebook or subscribe on YouTube yet, please make sure you get that in. This is going to be a fantastic episode. Please.
It is.
Stay tuned.
It is. So let's go to the recap. Why don't you start that off,
All
Doc?
right. Well, there's been so much talk about the Omicron variant, but I just, we always start off by level setting about where we are right now in this pandemic. We're 48.1 million cases of COVID. We're down in terms of our daily numbers of COVID new cases by about 24% from that peak that we had in September, but that's still translating to 70 to 80,000 cases a day. And in many places in the country, cases are back on the upswing, even though overall for the country, we're a little bit down in cases.
Okay.
And we're seeing the same thing with hospitalizations. Every week, we're getting about 40,000 new people hospitalized with COVID-19. We've been hovering around that for a few weeks now, but unfortunately, in places like Michigan and even here in DC, it's on the upswing. In Michigan specifically, where the vaccination rate is lower than the national average, cases are overrunning the hospital system again. They're at capacity, and they're even about to send in the National Guard to help out there. So it's not looking good for certain areas in Michigan.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Go ahead.
And then, I was just going to say, we're at 5.2 million deaths. We're at worldwide, 777,000 here in the U.S. Thankfully, our number of individuals dying of COVID each day is going down, but we're still at 950 new deaths daily from COVID-19. So we know, though, that with the cases and the hospitalizations going up, we just have to keep our fingers crossed that the death rate doesn't go up, although historically we know that it does.
It does. So some good news. Tell us the vax facts now.
Yeah, so 63% of those 5 years and older are vaccinated in the United States.
Okay.
And 20% of those who are eligible for getting boosted,
okay,
so those 18 and over,
yep,
have gotten their booster shot. So, the numbers are creeping up. The racial gap has been closing in vaccination. There's only about a 7-point gap between Black people and white people, which it used to be 14-point gap. So, so that's great. We know, though, that in certain pockets of the United States, by geography, by ethnicity, by age, certain vaccine uptake is still lagging. And we still don't have data for children in terms of the ethnic and racial breakdown for children, because it's just not being collected. Only 8 states are collecting it. So we don't know what that's looking like yet. But yeah, some positive news on the vaccine front.
Positive. What effect does those states not reporting children, what effect does it have for us?
Well, it means that we don't, in public health community doesn't know where to focus its efforts if it doesn't have a clear picture of who's getting vaccinated by race and ethnicity. So if there's certain demographics or groups of people who aren't getting vaccinated, there's no opportunity then to increase the outreach to them, to increase the explanation of why vaccination is important for children as well.
Okay, cool. Now on to the big O. And I don't mean Oscar Robertson. I don't mean that other big O. I mean this what it sounds like. Omicron.
Yeah, the Omicron variant.
Omicron. I should know this.
For those people who don't know the Greek alphabet, Omicron is one of the letters of the Greek alphabet, because all these variants are getting named after letters in the Greek alphabet, like alpha beta, gamma, delta,
epsilon, zeta, eta, theta, iota, kappa, lambda, nu, xi, omicron.
Thank you.
Okay. I just wanted to show off for a second. I just want to show off.
People want to know about the variant, though. That's what they really want to know about.
I'm sorry. Let's get serious. Let's talk about Omicron.
Yeah, so it's serious. This is a new variant of coronavirus. It has multiple mutations in the spike protein, which appears to be giving it an advantage of being more transmissible, more contagious. And it's been found in multiple countries throughout Africa, Asia, and Europe. WHO has called it a variant of concern because it does appear to be more contagious. So it was first spotted or detected in South Africa. That doesn't mean it originated there. It just means that the South Africans have an excellent public health surveillance system. They picked it up there first, and they saw that their case rates of Omicron doubled in like a week, just shot up exponentially. And so that's what clued them into, whoa, this is like really serious. That the U.S. has a travel ban from 8 Southern African countries in order to buy time to understand some key points about this Omicron variant. And those key points are, is it so contagious that it's going to take over from the Delta variant? Number one. Number two, will it respond to the antibodies produced by previous COVID infection, by vaccination, or by those given as treatment, the monoclonal antibodies? So we don't know that yet. And then, does it cause more severe infections? So far, it doesn't look like it, but only time will tell. And we need another week or two to be able to observe sort of the natural history of how it plays out, as well as understanding, in lab experiments, how the current antibodies that have been produced by the vaccine will handle it. So those things are still outstanding. No reason to panic yet, though, but definitely a reason to take this time when we've been given the heads up that if you're not vaccinated or you're not yet boosted and you're eligible, go get that done.
Right.
Now's the time.
So in the guidelines, so you just said get boosted, right? So the guidelines, they made pretty simple now, right?
Yeah, it was a little murky before, but they've really cleaned it up, so it's pretty simple. Number one, if you got your Moderna or Pfizer vaccine for COVID more than 6 months ago, and you're over 18, you're eligible to get boosted, period. Okay? Number two, if you got Johnson & Johnson 2 months ago or more, get a second shot, because it is now a 2-dose vaccine, not a 1-dose vaccine. So you got to get that second one to get your full protection.
Okay.
That's it.
That's
the booster guidelines. Yep.
That's pretty simple.
Yeah. So hopefully everybody can, act on it, because it's clear now.
Okay, cool. So look, let's change the subject. We've gone through Omicron and we've gone through the booster guidelines. You are what you eat after years and years. It's
Yeah.
been proven, huh?
Well, I wouldn't say it's proven, but what's really cool is there's this whole new understanding of what happens in our gut, in our intestines, with the bacteria that live there naturally. And when you eat, the bacteria that live in your gut eat also, right? They eat what you eat. And they produce waste products just like you produce waste products when you eat. Their waste is actually what gives you that lovely fragrance when you pass gas for some of us. Um, but it does more. It actually now appears that the waste products from the bacteria can affect our immune system. And
Wow.
that's the whole new science called the microbiome that's emerging. So this is a mouse study, so it hasn't been shown yet in humans, but it's really, I think, pointing us in the direction that things are going in. So gut bacteria produce different protein building blocks called amino acids
Mm-hmm.
when they eat, what you put
Mm-hmm.
in your body.
Mm-hmm.
And they show that in mice, these waste products actually activate the immune cells, right? Which we also
Mm-hmm.
have in our body. The same immune cells are called natural killer cells, and they
Right.
line our gut. And those cells are the ones that fight infection, and they also fight cancer. And so it showed that what the mice were fed, what was produced by the bacteria in their guts, either revved up or turned down these natural killer cells, making them more effective, in essence, um, um, making them more effective at doing what they do, which is
Mm-hmm.
provide immunity and fight against bacteria and fight cancer cells, anything foreign in our body.
Okay.
So the take home message is eating a healthy diet, high in vegetables, especially. Um, we're seeing that with our microbiome, it's making a difference in terms of the health of our immune system and actually many other conditions. But we're focused right now in this story on the immune system.
Okay. Well, cool. So I always wondered, and I've had this, uh, I've gone to get acupuncture, and I know now people have asked me, does it really work? So I'm asking you, Doc, does it really work?
Yeah. So I'm including this because we focus a lot on inflammation, right,
Mm-hmm.
and the dangers of inflammation in our body. And acupuncture is a traditional Chinese medicine technique, has been around for thousands of years,
Mm-hmm.
and it's used mainly to treat chronic pain and inflammation. And it uses small needles that are inserted into very specific points along our body's energy highways, the ways that the Chinese say that energy flows in our body through
Mm-hmm.
these channels called meridians.
Mm-hmm.
And acupuncture says that disease, or Chinese medicine says that disease happens when the energy flow in our body is blocked.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was in medical school, acupuncture wasn't even taught. It was actually kind of poo pooed. And we've come a really long way in Western traditional medicine and embracing acupuncture because it is turning out to be a really good treatment for chronic pain and inflammation. But we really had no understanding of how it worked. Well, recently, a team at Harvard Medical School showed that acupuncture actually stimulates a specific type of nerve cell in our body that triggers chemical reactions in the body that slow inflammation.
Wow.
And so that's really key because now, in gaining this increased understanding of how acupuncture actually works,
Mm-hmm.
it's probably going to start to be incorporated more and more into treatment for chronic pain to replace things like narcotics and opioids
Oh
that
yeah.
really aren't too great for us in the
Okay.
long run.
Okay. I love our viewers because they always have incredible things to say. And I'm going to grab a comment from a
Mhm.
young lady, Ellen Claire Lamb, who says acupuncture helps dogs and dogs have no placebo effect. So,
Right.
If
right?
Ellen says it about dogs, hey man, dogs.
Hey, that's
Dogs
important
tell
to
the
know.
truth.
Thank you, Ellen.
Dogs tell the truth. You know what
Right.
time? Hey Doc, do you know what time it is?
I think I do. What time is it?
The weekly debunk. Stopping misinformation in its tracks.
This one hails from Tyrone Twitter fingers again. And look, he sent me a text that had a cigarette burning on it. He said, my girlfriend told me that smoking marijuana in pregnancy is good for her morning sickness. And you know what I said, Doc?
What did you say?
I don't know about that. Excuse me, Dr. Bell. Is that true?
That's an excellent question because apparently cannabis use among pregnant women is on the upswing. It doubled. One study in California showed that cannabis use among pregnant women doubled from 2009 to 2016. And it's not just because people are smoking it to get high. Women are using it for morning sickness. But the problem is that women might not be aware that the cannabis might pose a risk to their unborn child. So there was a study done in New York City of 322 mothers who used cannabis at some point during their pregnancy or up to 18 months after. And it found that the children of those women who used marijuana during or soon after pregnancy were twice as likely to have children who became anxious, aggressive, or hyperactive. And, it's a little concerning because it appears that the levels of THC that are in marijuana today, and, that's the active compound in marijuana that makes you high, that they've increased significantly over the past, few years. And that THC can go from the mother's bloodstream, cross the placenta, and then get to the developing, fetus. And so that's the case no matter how you get the cannabis in your body, whether you smoke it, whether you eat it, whether you rub it on your skin, doesn't matter. It can get to the fetus that way. So does this study provide proof that cannabis was the cause of the behavioral health issues? No, it's an association that was seen. Mm-hmm. However, it is a caution to say, I wouldn't use it for morning sickness because it's not been shown to be safe for the developing baby. And actually a huge question mark is over it as to whether it might actually harm the developing baby. So, just a word of caution.
Thank you, Dr. Mel.
You're welcome. And thank you for being my co-host thus far.
We miss Lila.
Yes, we do miss Lila because that would have been a perfect debunk for her to take.
That would have been a perfect.
But she's coming back. She's on a bye week right now.
she got a LA bye week.
She got an LA bye week. Yeah.
All right. Yeah. See you later, Dr. Mel.
All right. So we are going to keep it moving and go on right into our topic for tonight. Figures from a CDC report earlier this year showed that life expectancy for Black men during the pandemic thus far fell by 3 full years between 2019 and 2020. And that's compared to 1.5 years for whites. At least half of that was due to COVID-19. There was an article in ProPublica published last year that was actually the inspiration for this show. It was entitled, How COVID-19 Hollowed Out a Generation of Young Black Men. And it states that Black men aged 35 to 44 at one point in the pandemic were dying at 9 times the rate of their white male peers. And it profiled a gentleman named Reverend Kawan Bates, who they held up as emblematic of hardworking, often overstressed, with the weight of the world on them, Black men. He was both a police officer and a minister from Vidalia, Georgia, and it mentioned the following. It said, he carried the stress of his life in his blood vessels, in his kidneys, and the extra pounds that accumulated with each passing year. He had diabetes and hypertension, and at 6'6", he was more than 100 pounds overweight. His official cause of death on April 1st, 2020 was COVID-19 related pneumonia and acute respiratory distress syndrome. However, his wife knew that it wasn't just COVID that killed him. We're going to talk tonight about Black men and COVID. Why has there been this extreme disparity? We are blessed tonight to have two incredible guests. My first guest is Miss Karen Linette. She's a songstress, actress, music historian, and radio personality from the DC metropolitan area. She's versed in a multitude of musical genres and blends music and education in her performances. Check out her long-awaited EP, Upside of Life, released in April of 2019. And Karen is going to talk with us about the fact that her family and how her family has been affected by COVID-19, and she's going to share her story with us tonight. Welcome, Karen. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And our next guest is the incomparable physician, Dr. Richard Goodjoin. He's a board-certified internist who's practiced for over 25 years and has taught internal medicine at both Emory and UNC Chapel Hill. His current practice is at the Gwinnett Clinic in Georgia, where he provides primary care with a focus on diabetes, high blood pressure, and HIV. Welcome, Dr. Goodjoin.
Thank you, Dr. Mel. It's so great to be here with you and Miss Lynette. I'm looking forward to this conversation.
All
Thank
right.
you.
So am I, and I know our audience is too. So I'm going to just jump right into it. I want to start off with Karen. You lost your brother Howard Franklin to COVID-19 this year. Our heart goes out to you. He was a colleague of Wayne, my husband, in the musical community, and I know is sorely missed. And I was wondering if you could start off just by telling us about Howard, about your brother.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Mel. Howard Kingfish Franklin Jr., Kingfish, what they referred to him as in the music community, was a larger than life personality, predominantly on the jazz circuit, known throughout the Washington metropolitan area, and actually I'm learning of his passing throughout the world. The condolences from around the world came in upon his passing. We lost him in August of this year, 2021, COVID related pneumonia, unfortunately. So, a bold, fierce father, friend, brother, educator, and comedian, pseudo comedian. But yeah, a larger than life personality. We shared many stages together. So yeah.
Wow. Right. And you both were musicians. I'm sure you performed together, right?
Quite a
Yeah.
bit, quite a bit. I actually started out in the early days of my career with him.
Yes. Well, I know you heard my opening and sort of that description of Reverend Bates. What do you think made Howard at higher risk for exposure? First of all, exposure to coronavirus.
Underlying health conditions, which I did not gain knowledge of that until till he landed in the hospital. We had actually performed together just shortly before his passing at the end of July, and a few days later he was sick. Unfortunately, the mindset was that he was going to tough it out. He was thinking it was probably just a cold, and he decided to stay home for a few days. But then, as his sickness progressed, he decided to go into the ER, and at that point, he had contracted pneumonia, unfortunately, and then that's the rest is history.
Right. That toughing it out. A lot of times Black men choose not to go to the doctor at first, right? I'm sure you've seen that, Dr. Goodjoin, right? What do you say to sort of the toughing it out? I'm just gonna, I don't want to deal with doctors. What do you say to that? Because there's actually a lot to unpack there based upon the history of the medical profession and African Americans.
Yeah, and I think that that's really important that we recognize that this the virus and pandemic did not happen in a vacuum. I mean, there have been years in which, uh, due to lack of access or even just lack of insurance, of course, that people and men have, black people and black men in particular, have had trouble accessing adequate health care. I think another thing that even when people do have insurance, it's interesting, depending on what type of employment you have, there may be a downside to even seeking health care because you don't have days off for sickness.
Right.
So therefore, and you will lose pay during that time. So I think some people, being primary uh, providers for their home and their family, do not want to take the time. I think, one of the things that's really interesting is that in the practices that I've had, we work weekends. So we have late night hours as well as Saturday and Sunday hours. So
Mhm.
it's actually enabled working people not to take off from work, during the days off so that they can actually seek care. But that's very rare. I mean, it's a very rare practices that really are able to do that. So I think that there are a lot of, barriers that even when you have insurance exists, and the cost of if you're non-insured really goes up tremendously.
Yes, yes. No, all that makes perfect sense. And back to you, Karen, talking about Howard. Um, Maybe you could share with us, if you don't mind, what were his thoughts about vaccination, and did he have a chance to get vaccinated?
Unfortunately, he did not get a chance to get vaccinated. He had considered it. Family members had reached out to him and said, "This is something that you should get done." He just, unfortunately, the big word of the day is procrastination. So he just didn't get an opportunity to do that. And I unfortunately didn't find out about him not being vaccinated until he actually landed in the hospital, and we had a conversation about it. So I wasn't able to harp on that and really stay on him about getting that done, unfortunately. But yeah,
Yeah. And I
just not getting
know,
around to it.
no, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, just again, just not getting around to it. And I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna do it. And so yeah, procrastination definitely
Right.
is at play
And I
there.
know a lot of people were and are still concerned about getting vaccinated and having side effects, those 24 to 72 hours where you might have fevers and sort of just be down. And for people who are entrepreneurs and performers, they might be a little hesitant about, taking the time off, to Dr. Goodjoin's point, knowing that that might be one of the potential things that sidelines them for a couple of days. Yeah.
That was definitely the case.
Yeah.
And I
So,
think also, I mean, as we remembered, it was difficult to get, early on, it was really difficult
mhm,
to even get in line to get a vaccine. And I know here, in Atlanta, there were very few places that where you could actually go in this metro area to get it. I mean, I think a lot of the uh, the pharmacies had very, very long waits. And fortunately, they did open up some large centers, but still, if you did not have good transportation, that also could be a barrier because it was just hard to get to the sites where you could
right,
actually, where they were doing mass vaccinations. And then you had to go for a second one. So, that
right.
even created more of a problem for people. So I think early on there was really a lot of difficulty in actually getting vaccinated. So I think the system let the people down as well, because
Yes.
one of the things that we had is that they weren't even giving primary care practices vaccines for our own patients.
Yes.
So we had to, we had, I think, a limited amount of doses, and they went really quickly. And a lot of people, as they were coming into the office and seeing us, wanted to get from their doctor so they know if there was a problem that they
Mhm.
could contact their doctor and deal with it. And if I
Right.
think that was I mean, and that still is a problem because even for boosters, we haven't been getting any
Right.
vaccines. And I think people feel comfortable talking to their doctor in the office
Mhm.
when we have them there to answer all their questions rather than going to unknown entities to
Right.
get it. And not to say those people did a great job
Right.
with, because where I've gotten mine, they did a great job being patient and answering questions,
Right.
that you.
But I think to your point though, doctors' offices are where people prefer sometimes, some people. And so to
Yeah.
increase the amount of coverage, the doctor's office is definitely a really key place. And in my introduction, I mentioned, Dr. Goodjoin, that you specialize in high blood pressure, or you focus on high blood pressure, HIV, and diabetes. Can you tell us, we heard that Howard had underlying health conditions. Can you tell us why those are three of the ones that you focus on in your practice?
Well, I think partly because they're very common in actually all communities, not just the African American communities. One of the things about the place where I live, in Gwinnett, it has a large Hispanic population, uh, Pacific Island, Asian Americans, as well as African Americans. So it's a pretty diverse community. And you see that really spanning all of the ethnic groups, as being
Mhm.
a problem. And I think a lot of it is, lifestyle. The American lifestyle is not the healthiest. I
Mhm.
think our reliance on processed foods. I think one thing that we really haven't also paid attention to is often the stresses of work and
Mhm.
not being able. I have a number of people who said, I just don't have time. You have people who are having one and two, two jobs that are working long hours. And so fast food is sometimes not the best
Yeah.
option for them, but the only option that they have in order to eat during, their busy days. So I think that creates a lot of problems and a lot of issues. And I think the stress with the high blood pressure being an issue, and not getting adequate sleep, because of work and
Mhm.
worry. So I think we see a lot of that as being a problem. And even people who are being treated for high blood pressure and diabetes are not at goal. I mean, they are specific. I know I
Mhm.
have a lot of patients who, who are taking medication, but are not necessarily at the targets that are necessary to be considered good control. And so, therefore, they're at high risk for having uh, uh, extraneous inflammation, which puts them at high risk for all sorts of diseases, including COVID and cardiovascular disease and cerebrovascular disease.
Yeah. Now, I'm glad you mentioned that. I just have some statistics I just want to run down just about high blood pressure. So, in the United States, the prevalence of high blood pressure for Black people is 54%. So, 54% of Black adults have high blood pressure.
Mhm, mhm,
But in certain cities, Chicago, Birmingham, Oakland, and Minneapolis, they did a study. They actually found that 75.5% of Black men, and 75.7% of Black women had high blood pressure by the age of 55. That's
mhm.
staggering. That's three out of
Right.
every four. And Black people get high blood pressure younger. One in three Black people aged 18 to 44 have high blood pressure. And the risk of heart attack and stroke, which we know are um, potential consequences of high blood pressure, are for a 45-year-old Black man, it's the same as for a 55-year-old white man. So Black people get the potential negative consequences of high blood pressure at an earlier age.
And I
And
think the
so,
important
yeah.
thing. Oh, okay,
No,
finish.
no, no, go ahead. That was
No,
it.
I think the important thing, it's not the African American, it's not the Africanism that causes that. It is actually the lifestyle in America, because what you
Right.
find is, if you measure blood pressures of people in Africa, they're much lower. And
Yes.
however, a generation or two while they're here, it actually starts to go up to mirror the native born African Americans here. So we know it's probably environmental, as well as social cultural, that where you get the
Mhm.
problem. So it's not anything intrinsically wrong with Black people that causes them to have
Right.
those problems.
I think that's an excellent, excellent point, as well as the added stress that Black people and other people of color have in
Mhm.
terms of the microaggressions and racism and the other things that are unique that we experience in addition to the sociocultural, finances, employment, etc. So I think that's also important to call out as well. Um, so Karen, you in talking with you, you mentioned that you had other family members that were affected by COVID. Can you tell us a little bit about that as well?
Yes, I can actually. My brother again was in town. He passed. I'm sorry. He was in town visiting here as we were doing a show together, and he was visiting with our father. So unfortunately, our father was able to. Our father contracted COVID, but he caught it early and was able to be administered the monoclonal antibodies, and then he was able to quarantine at home. And then along, with Howard as well, I want to add on that there were a number of musicians, colleagues that I've lost as well this year due to COVID, Black men in particular. So it's been a
Yeah.
trying year.
Yeah, I'm sure. Um, I wanted to go back to your dad, and I'm really happy that you said that he got monoclonal antibodies. What do you attribute the fact that he knew about them, that was a treatment option early on? How did he know about it?
I believe he got to the hospital. He detected it early and was able to get the treatment early, just catching it, like I said, right at
Mhm.
the beginning versus, again, toughing it out at home. He decided to go in right away because
Mhm.
my father also had a stroke a number of years ago. So he had also, as well as underlying health conditions. So he went right away.
Right. So he was sort of on high alert because he knew that being older and having the stroke and all that, he was at high risk. In other words,
Absolutely.
makes
Absolutely.
sense. Makes sense. Um, so Dr. Goodjoin, what are you telling your patients about monoclonal antibodies?
Well, I definitely am informing them that it's available to them if they do get. And we actually have, through the two hospitals that we have in our area, a sort of fast track. So I have like paperwork in our offices. So if someone comes down with COVID, we actually can, have the ability to sort of fax over information for the patient so they can go and actually get it administered. But that is actually just a recent development. I think it was really hard
Mhm.
initially to even know if which hospitals in our
Yeah.
area actually administered it and what criteria they were using in order to do that. Because I know I had a few patients go to the hospital specifically and were turned away, either because they didn't meet criteria or they, were there too late. I think part of the problem is that there was really horrendous testing. You couldn't really get tested. So therefore,
Mhm.
a lot of people would be outside the window by the time, they were tested and actually made it to the hospital. So I do
Mhm.
make sure that people do know that there is treatment available for them. And we do testing in our office. So we do make sure that to let people know that there is testing available in our area. That's at this point, it's actually fairly easy to get them in. So I think that's been an improvement. But Miss Lynette, I'm so glad your dad had that opportunity, to
Yeah,
do that, and because I think that that's it's definitely was life saving. I'm sure in that case.
absolutely.
Absolutely.
Um, I have a ton more questions, but I just realized that we need to get Mr. Wayne Bruce back in here to get us some questions for the audience because I know they probably have them. And
You
hi,
did not.
Wayne.
Hey, how's everybody? Dr. Mel, I want to thank you for just this conversation. And Karen Lynette, I want to thank you for coming on and talking about your brother, my friend Howard,
Mm.
who was an incredible musician. I have to say that first, and we razzed each other constantly because he belonged to a different fraternity, Divine Nine fraternity. He was an Alpha and I'm a Kappa, and so
Right.
it was every time we saw each other, it was on, and
Hello.
I we both personalities are kind of big. We both have large personalities, so and I'm going to speak of him because his spirit is through all of us that his life touched. And I know, just that was my guy. And we're on air now, but his passing affected a great number of musicians here and great number of our fraternity. So we belonged in different D9 organizations, but we were part of the same musician fraternity. And so, my fraternity brother, who is Howard, who is the fraternity of this musician and artist culture. So, we going to always celebrate him. So thank you for coming on, Dr. Goodjoin, a favorite of mine. And thank you for talking about this subject because, Black men are leaving us far too soon. So let me go to questions because I don't want to take up Dr. Clarke.
Well, actually, as you select a question, one of the things that we did not specifically say, and Karen, you alluded to it when you said that you have other musician friends, mainly men, who have died from COVID. That COVID actually disproportionately affects men more severely than it does women, at a rate of 1.2. So there was 1.2 times a higher death rate for men than women. And that's just across the board, regardless of race. And then when you get to the fact that COVID affected Black people at a disproportionate rate, hence you get the fact that Black men were disproportionately affected.
Absolutely.
So we have one of our favorites who is Yvonne Smith. And I guess she's talking about the monoclonal antibodies. Is it really a treatment? People tell me if you have treatments, why take the vaccine? So that's addressed to our panel.
Dr. Goodjoin, would you like to take that?
Yeah, I think that what you want to do is avoid getting COVID in the first place.
Come on.
And I think that, and also, like we talked about, there's a window in which getting monoclonal antibodies is effective. If you're outside of that window, then, you're likely not to get it. Also, you're not sure. I know at one point there was a limited supply. So there's not a guarantee, even if your hospital has it, that you would be able to get it in a timely enough way to actually, get protected. I think the important thing is to let people know vaccines are an inexpensive, easy way of preventing disease and disease spread. So that is why you want to opt for that. I know that's coming out with the pill that Merck is developing, and I think that they found that it wasn't quite as effective in treatment as they thought. So I think that the vaccines have shown that they definitely work. They are definitely safe, and they're definitely the preferred mechanism for preventing getting the disease. I think you can't really count on treatments at this point. And I think also they're saying with this Omicron variant that the monoclonals might not work anymore, be as effective. So I think that you have to think about what do you want to prevent. And also, like we talked about, we were talking about earlier about work and abilities. You still put people at some financial deficit if they do have to go to the hospital and get this administered too. Whereas with the vaccine
versus a free vaccine.
Absolutely.
And not to mention too, it's not just hospitalization and death, it's also long COVID. And we know that vaccination cuts down significantly on the rate of people getting long COVID too, which can cause you to have disability for weeks and months, even after the initial infection is over. Right. So definitely the goal is to not get sick.
Right.
That is the goal. We have another question coming from, our viewers are just so smart. This one is from Valerie Spalding, who is also in the healthcare field. She's a nurse, I believe. And she writes, yes, some people don't get how the vaccine can significantly cut back on severe illness and hospitalization if insured. She writes, how expensive are monoclonal antibodies? Are the uninsured less likely to be offered that option, in your opinion?
They're super expensive. That's one thing about the pills that are being developed by Merck and Pfizer. They're less expensive and easier to get at than the monoclonal antibodies, which have to be administered by IV, which is one of the reasons why they're super expensive. There are, I believe, some options for assistance, financial assistance. So I don't think that is a barrier to getting the monoclonal antibodies, but your doctor has to be aware, or whoever's treating you has to be aware. You have to be in the window. You have to be able to get to an infusion center that offers it. So there are a lot of sort of steps along the way, which is one of the reasons I ask Karen as to how her dad knew, that it could be that was available to him. And thankfully he went early to a facility that was able to point him in the right direction of getting those monoclonal antibodies.
We have another question. This one comes from Yvonne, but also I can piggyback on this question. I've heard that we inherited high blood pressure because of the trauma in the Middle Passage. And I think, Dr. Mel, we've discussed on the show about the trauma that Black and African-American people, or all people, hold in their DNA. I won't say just us, but all people hold in their DNA.
Dr. Goodjoin, would you like to take that?
Yeah, definitely. And I do think that is a strong component of that. But, I noticed in my years of practice that I will have people who are really tough hypertensives, and they retire from their jobs and their blood pressure is finally well controlled. So some of it is just the day-to-day trials and tribulations that people have. And you have people who will change their diet or exercise more or do yoga or other lifestyle changes and have lowered their blood pressure. So I do think there is a component of the trauma that we inherited, but I do also think it's also lifestyle that has a great part of it. And I always tell people, some people come to my office and feel like, well, my grandfather had high blood pressure, my daddy had high blood pressure, so I'm okay with having high blood pressure. And I always tell them, your goal should be not to take medication and to do the things, particularly when you have young people, to do the things lifestyle wise that will get them on a healthier trajectory, so they're not taking medication and ultimately will have less complications, from having high blood pressure and other diseases. And I think that's one of the things that we really do as African Americans in the healthcare field push, is that let's not, yes, there are excellent medications for treating all sorts of medical ailments, but let's try to make the right lifestyle changes so that we don't have to rely on them and can still live a healthy life. I think that is definitely a very important thing. And, I love that thing about, talking about what you eat, because I think that has a lot to do with it too. And it's not to say you can't enjoy, your ribs or whatever, but to have a balanced approach to approaching your food intake, your exercise and things like that, and getting even getting a good night's sleep.
Right. Absolutely. I talk about the 5 self-health actions: nutrition, water, sleep, movement, and managing the stress in your life. Those are the 5 self-health actions. And I think what the person might have been referring to is something called epigenetics, which shows that the trauma that you go through can actually affect your DNA and pass it down to the next generation and make them at higher risk for things like high blood pressure, obesity, and PTSD. And we've had 400 years of trauma potentially being passed down like that. But I think Dr. Goodjoin's point is that even though you're at risk for it, doesn't mean that the choices that you make in your life can't help to mitigate that risk, lower that risk, and actually make it so that you can live your life without high blood pressure and live your life without diabetes, given the choices that you make. And sometimes it's harder for some of us, like you said, the pressured lives we live and the fast food and economics of being able to afford food or even live someplace where healthy food is available. You know, we have food deserts. So it's very
Right.
complicated, but the goal is really to try to eat healthfully and do practices every day to try to decrease the stress in our lives, whether it's yoga, meditation, um, basket weaving, playing the
Right.
guitar, whatever it is.
Okay.
Yep.
Good. Playing guitar can be stressful. I'm just saying. don't don't try to play guitar unless you it's not the magic bullet of non-stress when it's your job. Okay, we have a question from Philippa Elder. I would like to know about pericarditis in young black men who take the COVID-19 shot. My grandson needs to take the shot, but his father had pericarditis. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, that definitely is a side effect that's seen, but I think it's fairly rare. I mean, I don't necessarily, and I think part of what ends up happening is that, uh, with all medications or treatments, there are side effects. And we definitely, I always tell people who are concerned about taking the vaccine, yes, there are things that can happen. The pericarditis, however, is a known side effect and something that you can be treated, if detected. So one of the things I tell people, if you do experience any concerns after getting a vaccine, go to see your doctor or a doctor to get evaluated, because many of the side effects that people do have, if treated, if found early, could be mitigated and not cause any long-term problems. But I'm not sure of the exact numbers. Dr. Mel, you may be more familiar with that, but I don't think it's very common, even though it is a known side effect, with
Yeah.
young men.
It is extremely rare. It's been seen following the mRNA vaccines, Pfizer and Moderna. Extremely rare. Uh, uh, Most times very mild, meaning treated at home. But as Dr. Goodjoin said, if you have any untoward side effects that you don't expect, go see a doctor or your doctor immediately thereafter. And it is so rare that it shouldn't be a reason to not take the vaccine, because the risk of getting pericarditis or myocarditis following COVID is several orders of magnitude higher than the risk of getting it if you get vaccinated. And I'm not sure that there is a hereditary component, because I know that in your question you asked about his dad having had pericarditis as a child. Again, unclear what the reason why he may have had pericarditis, but it's not necessarily that it is a hereditary reaction to a vaccine.
And I've not, in my practice, and even amongst the physicians I've known who were younger who've gotten, I don't know anyone who's reported any cases, and of having pericarditis. So I mean, not to say that I'm, my practice is huge, but I mean, I've seen and talked to a lot of docs, and it's not something that is anything that any of the people I engage with have really noted in people who've gotten vaccinated.
Great question, Philippa. Thank you.
It really is, yes.
All right, that's the show, Dr. Mill.
Wow, it has passed extremely quickly. Thank you all. Thank you, Karen Lynette. Thank you, Dr. Richard Goodjoin. You all were excellent, gave wonderful information. Thank you for being so transparent and sharing your story about your family, Karen. Thank you to the audience. You all had fantastic questions, as always. And thank you all for joining us. I'm going to be, I'm wrapping up now. I'm going to be on the Russ Parr morning show tomorrow morning at 7:45. If you want to tune in, that's Eastern time. And if I don't see you between now and next Monday, when we will definitely be right back here at 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific on YouTube and Facebook. If I don't see you, please remember to be wise, to be well, and to be health empowered. Thank you for joining us here on Excuse Me Doctor this week, and be safe out there.
My name is Dion Davis. I've tried to live my life with no regrets, but I guess my final regret is not getting vaccinated. Please, don't let not getting vaxxed be your final regret.